Hey, what up everybody, this is Steve Breach coming to you. Tonight I watched the newest edition of the Monday Night War documentary series going over Bret Hart and the Screwjob's career in WWE and WCW. These are awfully very fun. This was a very informative show talking about a situation that happened at 1997 Survivor Series. This was something that almost happened 20 years ago, and it's honestly one of the biggest wrestling stories of the last 20 years. I mean, definitely you can think of how many times WWE has dove into this well and covered it. Every year the Survivor Series comes around, they dig this story up and they beat it to death, honestly. I mean, and this was a show that I don't think a lot of people are really looking forward to. If you look into your WWE DVD collection, this is definitely covered on the first DVD they made with Bret the Hitman Hart when he came back, sort of. The Best There Is, Best There Was, Best There Ever Will Be. It's covered on the My Journey, or is it the Shawn Michaels documentary one goes into it. Definitely on the Greatest Rivalry set, the Confidential set talks about this. So it's kind of, it's kind of weird for them to dig this up once again. It was awful nice of them just to go out and purchase or borrow, however they had to get it. The Wrestling with Shadows documentary is shown in clips during this. I was very surprised that was a sort of a great touch to add along to this, to see sort of Bret Hart's feelings as they went along. They show him, at the dinner room table talking about, he's talking to Vince, he's talking to Eric, he's trying to figure out which deal is better, and they pick up this documentary talking about WrestleMania, the Iron Man match, Bret Hart versus Shawn Michaels. Bret Hart, who was the champion, was going to be going up against the fresh new babyface of Shawn Michaels, and they were going to have a 1-hour match, which was supposed to show off the new generation of wrestling. It was supposed to give Bret some time away from the ring where he was going to hand the title over to Shawn and see what Shawn was going to be able to do as a champion. Both of these guys both came up at the same time, which is highlighted on the Greatest Rivalries. It's funny how their career paralleled themselves, almost a lot like Triple H and The Rock. They talked about this on the Jericho podcast with Triple H, when they both came in as guys new to the WWF, and then next thing you know, they were going after the Intercontinental Championship, and after that, then they were fighting each other in the Nation, and from there, it was in the main event, and just so on and so on from there on. You had Bret and Shawn. They come in as the members of the Rockers and the Hart Foundation, and they have a series of matches there, and then next thing you know, they're I don't think they were singles wrestlers at the same time. Well, then again, there is that ladder match out there, but I can never remember Shawn Michaels being a competitor for the Intercontinental Championship that much with Bret Hart. But then then they go into their rivalry that would lead to them to being the main eventers of the company. And a lot of times when Shawn Michaels was running the company, Bret Hart was having other feuds. They were sort of treating him like he was the legend of the WWE while Shawn Michaels was the champion. Both of them were in high-class matches, and they would sort of teeter-totter back and forth between who the main event was. Like, there was one point in your houses in SummerSlams, you got Bret the Hitman Hart having a long series of matches against Jerry the King Lawler. After Bret Hart won the King of the Ring, Jerry Lawler hit him over the back of the head with the scepter and the crown, saying he was the real king of the WWF. But they say that basically the lead up to WrestleMania, the Iron Man match, that was when everything started to fall apart for Bret and Shawn. It turned into more of a competition. Both of the guys wanted to be the leader of the company. Nobody wanted to be following behind the other guy. And it just turned into just high school girl mentality of, talking about each other behind each other's back. Trying to, bury the guy to the office and just trying anything they can do to make sure that they were going to be one-ups on each other. They started a series of promos and vignettes which were supposed to lead up to the rematch at the next WrestleMania, which ended up being WrestleMania 12, where Bret Hart fought Stone Cold Steve Austin in the match that would make both of their careers probably one of Bret the Hitman Hart's one of his best matches that he's ever had. Stone Cold Steve Austin, the match that really solidified him as a guy that was going to be going towards the main event. I know that it would take a good 6 to 9 months before the balls really started rolling. But definitely that was one of the matches that really made a lot of people take notice of Stone Cold Steve Austin, where they turned the double turn, and it was one of the the biggest things in the background of the Attitude Era was just getting Stone Cold to that point where he could become the star that he ended up becoming. So much of that was just accidental. I think that Stone Cold Steve Austin believed in himself that he could be a star and he could be a main eventer for the WWF, but I don't know that it was really set in place that he really could do that. And definitely having the big match against Bret, where he got put in the sharpshooter and he bled all out. That only happened because Shawn had lost his smile. They go into the fact Bret said he doesn't believe Shawn. Shawn never really has come out and said that that's why he did it, but basically Shawn said he had a knee injury in February, which canceled what was scheduled Shawn versus Bret match. And then the title ended up being Undertaker versus Psycho Sid. Psycho Sid was the champion going into WrestleMania, and they switched the title over to Undertaker. But they didn't really go into the Attitude Era a whole much. They mostly talked about the screw job. But honestly, just as a second here, I honestly believe that Bret Hart doesn't get the credit that is due to him for really being one of the guys who really did start the Attitude Era. As a part of, his character, turning heel and going against Shawn Michaels and going against Vince McMahon, and basically being the Canadian hero, which you would, really get to see during the gang warfare period, which was DX, the Hart Foundation, the Nation, the Los Boricuas, they had the biker gang that I can't think of their name off the top of my head, led by Crush. They had a steel cage match on Monday Night Raw. One of my most favorite moments, and one of my favorite matches from Raw history. And I don't think off the top of my head it's on any WWE DVD. Hopefully it'll be put up on the network sooner than later. I'm sure if you look for this, you can find it. But this is the go-home show to WrestleMania, I believe. And it's Sid going up against Bret Hart for the championship in a steel cage match. And Stone Cold Steve Austin is in the back, and he gets this thought into his head that if Bret Hart ends up winning this match, he's going to be fighting at WrestleMania against Bret Hart, and that means he's going to be fighting for the WWE Championship since Bret Hart would be the champion. So he comes down to the ring, and he's going to make sure that Bret Hart wins the match. He hates Bret Hart, but he's going to help him. Undertaker sees Stone Cold Steve Austin out there trying to help out Bret the Hitman Hart win this match, and he knows that if Stone Cold Steve Austin helps Bret Hart, his championship shot at WrestleMania is out the window, and he's just going to be fighting Psycho Sid in a normal match. So you end up having 4 guys who hate each other teaming together, basically trying to find out what's going to happen. The end of the match ends up falling all apart, and as they're tearing the ring apart, Vince McMahon gets into the ring, and he tries to interview Bret Hart. Bret Hart shoves him to the ground. "This is bullshit. You screwed me, Vince." And it's just basically like a prelude to what would happen with the screwjob finish at Survivor Series, and Bret Hart's cussing on live TV on USA. And I just remember I was I was a teenager, but I wasn't an older teenager. I was 13 probably at the time, and I just remember these are words that you don't hear on WWE TV. These are words that shouldn't be said on television. WWE's probably going to get in a lot of trouble for this. It drew a lot of attention to what was going on, and Bret Hart's been asked about this, and Vince just told him to go out there and say whatever he said, swear as much as he wants to, don't worry about it if they get fined. He would cover for it. Vince was just looking for anything that was going to get attention onto the product, and that is sort of what led them into taking those more gambles, and basically DX doing the suck-its, and basically Shawn Michaels being able to say whatever he wanted to, and Triple H, them having to do the thing where they said they weren't going to say certain things at certain times. A lot of credits always pointed towards, Stone Cold Steve Austin, Shawn Michaels, Triple H, and those guys for the Attitude Era. But I think it definitely started that night with Bret Hart. It really got the ball rolling with Vince taking more decisions on what was going to be happening on TV from then on out. Talking about the screw job, I've made videos about this before. I think there's more to the story that WWE always likes to tell about the screw job. I honestly do believe I am one of the Survivor Series 1997 truthers. I do believe that it's a work more than anything else. I know I'm not the only person who believes this from reading a lot of things online and from watching a lot of shoot interviews. There's a lot of boys, Kevin Nash, X-Pac, Gregory Helms, the Hurricane, to name a few that have gone into detail on their video shoot interviews talking about just everybody had something to gain from that, and it's just too bad that WCW didn't use that to help Bret Hart. He wasn't able to capitalize on it the ways that any smart wrestling company would have done. They showed just basically Bret Hart faxing off his contract to WCW, accepting their deal of $3 million a year for 3 years, $9 million to wrestle there, and that was a deal that he had worked out with Bischoff in the past. And he ended up signing with Bret for he ended up signing with Vince for 20 years, for a deal for less money, but it was over a longer period of time, so he would be financially set. It's funny to think about that if that deal wouldn't have fallen apart with Bret leaving because Vince said he couldn't afford him, Bret Hart would still be under contract to WWE right now. And it's easy to say that he would have moved into some sort of commissioner role or something like that, but there's a lot of things to think about. If the screw job doesn't happen, Undertaker's not in the ring with Shawn Michaels during that Royal Rumble match, and he doesn't fall out of the ring onto the casket, and he doesn't break his back, and he doesn't leave for 6 years. If Bret never goes to WCW, he never gets kicked in the head by Goldberg, and his career's over. So, there's a lot of things to think about. What would have happened if that night wouldn't have happened? They get to tell the story the way it all came back together. Basically, Bret sat on the sidelines for 12 years, and he gets to come back, shake hands with Shawn Michaels, and they've made documentaries about that. You get the Greatest Rivalries Blu-ray set. I think you get sort of like a day in the life of seeing everything that Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels went through. It's always funny, whenever I see that handshake on TV. I don't know if it's my mind, playing tricks on me, or if I really see it the way it is, but it looks like Bret sticks his hand out, and the second Shawn puts his out, it almost looks like Bret pulls it back a little, maybe like making it look like Shawn goes more. But I've always been very critical of Bret Hart. I like Bret Hart. I have a lot of respect for Bret Hart, but at the same time, I think he's a whiny crybaby about a lot of things. And I don't know. I've always taken his side on the whole screw job sort of finish, thinking that he should have done business, and things probably would have worked out a lot better for a whole lot of other people. His run in WCW was just piss poor horrible. The reason why they bring him in, he ends up being the guest referee in his debut, where he screws over the NWO, and I can't really remember how he ended up joining the NWO later. It seems that, if he debuted at Starrcade, that means he would have only been out of wrestling for 3 months before he came on. But I remember watching wrestling at that time thinking that Bret Hart was going to debut on every Nitro and every pay-per-view. And to me, those 3 months honestly felt like almost a year before he debuted in WCW. They did not jump the gun like they should have. I don't know if there was some sort of waiting period they had to do, but you got to think of if they released him from his contract, and they weren't paying him, and he was under WCW contract, they should have been able to use him on day number 1. I don't think at that time they were doing 90-day no-compete clauses and things like that, so why they didn't use him, I've got no clue. And the fact that he had to be Hogan's lackey, wasn't helping anybody out along the way either. But definitely a good watch. WCW Monday Night War against WWF at the time. I can't remember what it was called, but it was about Bret the Hitman Hart. I believe it's episode 4. It might be episode 5, but definitely a great watch tonight. I have a video on the Screwjob. It's called 1997 Survivor Series Screwjob. If you want to know more about that, go check that one out. Thank you very much. Peace out, everybody.